Is shadow faster than light? A shadow is not a physical object, so it doesn't travel like light. While shadows can appear to move faster than light in certain conditions, this is an illusion. Shadows are created when an object blocks light, but they don't have mass or energy. Light, however, is the fastest thing in the universe, traveling at 299,792 kilometers per second. But what if, by some strange supernatural power, shadows became physical objects? Would they be able to travel faster than lights? Could we harness their strange new abilities to create spaceships? It all started one morning when a science experiment went horribly wrong. I had just arrived at the lab, where the group of scientists and I were testing a new theory about light and shadows. It was supposed to be a simple experiment: shine a strong beam of light into a massive object and study the way the shadow moved. But something was different this time. As we observed the shadow, it started to look solid. At first, it was just a slight blur around the edges, but within moments, the shadow began to thicken, almost as if it were becoming a real physical object. I stared in disbelief. The shadow wasn't just an absence of light anymore. It had weight, form, and even texture. It moved like a fluid, but it could maintain its shape. Panic filled the lab. "Is this really happening?" one of the researchers shouted. And that's when things took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, the shadow shot across the room. The scientists scrambled to catch their equipment, but the shadow had become something else. Fast, impossibly fast. It darted from one end of the lab to the other in the blink of an eye. We couldn't believe it. Was it moving faster than light? It seemed so, though we had no way to measure it. The shadow had become a living thing, something far beyond our control. I knew we had to act fast. The shadow was growing, and as it touched more surfaces, it absorbed light from the surrounding. It was like watching a black hole, except it wasn't collapsing inwards. It was expanding, eating up everything in its path. What if it kept spreading? What if it covered the earth? There was no time to lose. I grabbed a portable power source and some essential supplies and raced outside. To my horror, I could see that the shadow had already leaked out of the lab and was moving through the city streets. People were screaming and cars were crashing into each other as the shadow blocked their paths. I ran to the nearest transportation hub, thinking I could use a helicopter to fly away. But as I neared the airfield, I realized something even more terrifying. The shadow was lifting off the ground, defying gravity. Could it fly? At this point, I had one crazy thought. Could we build a spaceship out of this physical shadow? If we could move faster than light, could we use it to escape this disaster? But I quickly realized that this was no ordinary object. It was uncontrollable. Even if we could somehow harness its power, the shadow had no structure, no stability. It wasn't something we could build a ship from. Worse still, as it moved, the world around it seemed to warp and distort, as if reality itself was breaking down. Still, I had to survive. I boarded a train headed for the mountains, hoping to get far away from the expanding shadow. As the train sped along, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if this shadow kept growing? Would it eventually envelop the earth? What if it reached space? Would it absorb planets, stars, even galaxies? The very thought made me shiver. As the train climbed higher, I tried to piece together what was happening. Shadows are normally just an absence of light, right? They have no mass or energy. But now, this shadow had become something entirely new, a physical object that moved at impossible speeds. If it could travel faster than light, it might not be bound by some rules that govern the universe. The idea was both fascinating and terrifying. Faster than light. Travel is something humans have always dreamed about, but now that it was happening, it felt more like a nightmare. Suddenly, the train jolted to a stop. We were at a small mountain town, and I got off. The shadow hadn't reached here yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. I looked up in the sky, hoping for some kind of answer. Could we stop this thing, or was it the end of the world as we knew it? I found a quiet spot in the cabin, far from the chaos. I wrote down my observations. The shadow had become a physical entity capable of unimaginable speed. But it was dangerous. It absorbed light, consumed everything in its path, and it distorted reality. While the idea of faster than light travel was exciting, it came with devastating consequences. In the end, I knew there was no way to control it. The shadow had become too powerful. My only hope was to keep running, moving from place to place, as the world slowly fell into darkness.